The line at the bank was moving slowly, as it always does on Friday afternoons. I stood with my license plate in my hand, looking at the young people who were typing something quickly into their phones without looking up from their screens. At my age, there's plenty of time to just stand there and think, and there was a lot to think about. Yesterday's conversation was still ringing in my ears. Leland and Priscilla were sitting in the kitchen, sipping coffee from my cups and discussing plans for remodeling the house. My house. They spoke as naturally as if I was already lying in the cemetery next to Dora. "This bedroom could be turned into a nursery," Priscilla said, pointing toward my room. "It's too big for one person anyway." Leland nodded, taking a bite of my sandwich. "Yeah, and the bathroom will need to be modernized. This old plumbing is going nowhere at all." I was washing dishes at the sink and pretended not to listen. But I heard every word. They were discussing my life in the past tense, even though I was standing 3 feet away from them, a lively and healthy 75-year-old man. "And the ceilings are high, that's good," Priscilla continued, peering into my bedroom through the open door. "Only that old-fashioned wallpaper will have to be torn down. And change the parquet to laminate, it's easier to take care of." Dora and I picked out wallpaper 30 years ago. We went to 3 different stores, argued about colors, and she insisted on blue roses. "Chris, they're as delicate as my grandmother's house," she said then. "And the whole family laid the parquet. Even little Leland helped carry the boards." Now the son wanted to throw it all away like old junk. "And this old sofa can be thrown away at once," Leland continued, looking around the living room. "And the piano, too. Who needs a piano nowadays? It's just taking up space." It was the piano that Dora played on. Every night after dinner, she sat at the keys and played old tunes. Chopin, Bach, sometimes jazz compositions. Leland, as a child, loved to listen to his mother play, asking to repeat his favorite pieces. He snuggled up to his mom when she played Moonlight Sonata, saying that this music was like a fairy tale. Now he regarded the instrument as junk that only interfered with his plans. "And the paintings could be sold," Priscilla suggested, looking at the walls. "Some of them look expensive, especially that one over there with the boats." The painting of boats had hung in the living room for 20 years. Dora had bought it from a small gallery in Nice when we were celebrating our silver wedding. We were walking along the seafront, going into tiny stores, and she saw this landscape and said, "Chris, look how beautiful it is. It's our bay, only in the French version." The artist depicted fishing boats at dawn. The water was golden from the sun, and the sky was a soft pink. "Yes, some are antique," Leland agreed. "You could get an appraiser to come out, or auction them off right away." They were planning to sell off my life piecemeal, like a bankruptcy estate, and they did it calmly, deliberately, as if they were buying new curtains. "And the garage could be turned into a workshop," Priscilla said dreamily. "I've wanted to take up ceramics for a long time, or fitness. There's plenty of room in there. The garage where I fixed cars, where my father's tools were kept, where Leland learned to change tires and check oil. When he was 16, he'd go there every weekend, and we'd work together on his first car, an old Honda I'd bought him for his birthday. He was so enthusiastic, asking a million questions about the carburetor and brake pads. Now there were boxes of Christmas decorations, Dora's bike that I couldn't throw away, and old photo albums. "And the library can be put away," my sister-in-law added. "Who needs paper books now? No one reads anyway." My books, classical literature, memoirs, historical studies, some copies I bought when I was young, made notes in the margins, put bookmarks. Dora liked to read in the evenings, took books from my shelves, then we discussed what we had read. Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, Hemingway. Our evening conversations were built around these authors. The books were my life, my thoughts, my education. "Yes, and it'll make room," my son encouraged. "We could put a bigger TV in there. And a game console. A big TV to replace my library. A TV that would show reality TV shows and baby food commercials. And the game console would take the place where Dora's desk stood, an antique secretary she'd inherited from her great-grandmother." "Number 38, the cashier announced. I looked at my ticket. 41. Just a little longer to wait. The conversation in the kitchen went on for over an hour. Leland and Priscilla were making detailed plans, as if they were preparing for a military operation. What furniture to keep, what to throw away, where to put the crib, how to convert my library into a playroom. How much do you think all the remodeling will cost? Priscilla asked, pulling out her tablet and opening some kind of calculator app. 40 to 50,000 probably, Leland replied thoughtfully. A designer is expensive, renovations too, but it's an inheritance, so no problem. They'd been spending my money even before I died, planning, calculating, dreaming about how they would live in their new house, and I stood by and listened to my son turn my possessions into numbers on a tablet screen. And his car could be sold, Priscilla remembered. Or should we keep it? You've got an old one already. My car, the 2,000-year-old Mercedes I bought with Dora. It took us 3 months to pick it out, comparing models, arguing about the color. Dora insisted on dark blue. Chris, that color is so elegant. We'll look like real aristocrats in it. We use this car to go on vacations, to take little Leland to doctor's appointments, to pick him up from school. And for the last year of Dora's life, I drove her to the hospital every day for chemotherapy. Let's keep her, my son decided. Mine's really old and this one's still got a ride. He was going to drive the car his mother was dying in, and that didn't bother him. Where are all the papers kept? The daughter-in-law inquired. The will, the insurance, the bank accounts? In the safe, I guess, Leland shrugged. Or in the desk. We'll figure it out later. They discussed my personal papers as if they already had the rights to them. The will I'd made 5 years ago, the life insurance, the bank accounts, all of it interested them far more than my health or well-being. Number 39. The line was advancing. It was stuffy in the bank. The air conditioning was not working well. A young mother with an infant was tiredly rocking a stroller, the baby whimpering from the heat. An elderly man in a suit was nervously looking at his watch, apparently late for a meeting. I stood quietly and thought back to yesterday. After lunch, Priscilla called someone and discussed something for a long time, covering the receiver with her hand. I only caught a few phrases. Yes, she'll be free soon. No, I don't think it will be long. Of course I'll call right away. When she had finished speaking, Leland asked who had called. A friend of a friend, the sister-in-law answered carelessly. She's doing some repairs. I told her we have a big project coming up. Big project was what she called remodeling my house, a project that would begin after my funeral. When do you think we can get started? My son asked, and there was such impatience in his voice, as if he were talking about a long-awaited vacation. Well, he's 75, Priscilla shrugged. Anything can happen at that age. Besides, he's been a little pale lately. Pale. I was pale because I hadn't been sleeping well, worried about my son, who was asking for money more and more often, and less interested in what I was doing. And it turned out that my pallor inspired their hopes of a speedy inheritance. Yes, and his heart is weak, Leland nodded. Remember the attack last year? An attack. One time I got a heartache after climbing the stairs. I took a pill, and it went away in half an hour. The doctor said that this is a common thing at my age, advised me to walk more and less nervous. But for my son, this episode was proof of my imminent death. Number 40. Another step forward. I pulled my ID out of my pocket, checking to make sure everything was in place. Passport, driver's license, bank statement, all ready for the new card. Last night after dinner, I sat in a chair and read the newspaper. Leland and Priscilla were on the couch watching TV, some real estate program where they showed expensive houses and talked about their value. Look, what a beautiful house, her sister-in-law marveled, pointing at the screen. And the grounds are big, and there's a swimming pool. It must be expensive, the son remarked. $2 million at least. But if you sell this house, she waved her hand toward my living room, you could buy something like this. Sell my house, the house I'd bought 40 years ago, where Leland had been born and raised, where Dora and I had lived the best years of our lives. To them, it was just real estate that could be traded for something more modern. And this neighborhood is going up in value right now, Leland added. The realtor said prices are up 30%. They'd already consulted with a realtor. As long as I've been alive, they've been studying the real estate market and planning the sale of my house. And the inheritance taxes will be small, Priscilla announced cheerfully. I read it on the internet. Inheritance taxes. They'd looked into even those details. I turned the page of the newspaper loudly then, hoping to get their attention. I wanted them to realize I could hear every word, but they didn't even look in my direction. Does he have life insurance? My sister-in-law asked. Of course he does. Not a bad amount, by the way. They discussed my life insurance like they discussed the weather forecast or gasoline prices, calm, casual, without a shadow of embarrassment. "Number 41, called out the cashier. Finally, I approached the window, handed my documents to a young woman in a white blouse. She smiled a professional smile and began punching data into the computer. "Mr. Ridgway, would you like to order a new card to replace the one you lost?" "No," I answered calmly. "I want to close access to the old account and open a new one with different details." The girl raised her eyebrows. "Do you have the old card?" I pulled a plastic card out of my wallet and placed it on the counter. "Here it is, but I need new details and a new PIN number." The cashier was clearly perplexed, but began to process the paperwork. Such requests were infrequent, especially from elderly customers. Usually, old people were afraid of all sorts of changes with bank cards, complaining about complicated technology and asking to leave things as they were. But I was no ordinary old person. At least I didn't want to be anymore. "Are there any special limit requirements?" the girl asked, filling out the paperwork. "Yes, put the monthly limit at $1,000. "1,000, she marveled. "But your old account had a limit of $15,000 a month. Now it'll be 1,000. She shrugged and made the change. It was her business to do the paperwork, not to figure out the customer's motives. But I saw her look at me in surprise. I guess she thought the old man was starting to lose his mind. In fact, I was thinking clearly for the first time in a long time. "You'll need 3 business days to make a new card," the cashier explained, "and we'll block the old one today as soon as you sign the application." "Great," I said. As she typed the paperwork, I thought about how Leland and Priscilla would react when they discovered the card didn't work. They'd probably assume it was a technical error. They'd call me in a panic, demanding that I take care of the problem immediately. They will shout, accuse the bank of unprofessionalism, demand compensation for the inconvenience, and then I will explain everything to them, calmly in detail, without unnecessary emotions. "And one more question," I added when the girl finished with the card. "I want to know the procedure for changing the beneficiary on an account." "Beneficiary?" she interjected. "The person to whom the money passes in the event of my death." The cashier nodded and pulled out another form. "Sure. You'll need to fill out an application and have it notarized, or you can do it here with our bank counselor." I took the paperwork. Under current beneficiary was the name Leland Ridgway. Soon another name would be there. Not a person, but an organization that really needed help. "Sign here and here," the girl pointed to the lines. "You'll receive the PIN number for your new card in a separate letter in 2 days." I signed in sprawling letters. My hand didn't tremble, though many people my age complained of shaky fingers. Apparently, determination gave firmness. "Thank you for contacting our bank," the teller said, handing me a certificate of blocking the old card and a new contract. I folded the documents neatly and tucked them away in my wallet. Now Leland and Priscilla were going to have a big problem with their plans. As I left the bank, I felt a strange relief. It was as if I had dropped a heavy weight I had carried on my shoulders for years. The California sun warmed my face, and a light breeze from the ocean smelled of salt and freedom. The weather was always nice in Santa Monica, and that's why I loved it. Dora liked the climate here too, saying that you could live happily ever after here. I could live happily ever after. But happiness was difficult. But today I took the first step in changing that. A week ago Tuesday morning, I was watering the roses in the garden when I heard the sound of a car in the driveway. Leland rarely came on weekdays. His work at the car dealership took up all his time, and in the evenings he preferred to relax at home with his wife. But at 10 in the morning, his black Lexus stopped at my gate, and not only his son and daughter-in-law got out of the car, but also an unfamiliar man in an expensive suit. "Hi, Dad," Leland waved at me, heading toward the porch. "We won't be long." Priscilla smiled, that strange smile I'd learned to recognize over the years of knowing her. It was the kind of smile she had when she wanted to ask for something or hide her awkwardness. The stranger, meanwhile, pulled a file folder out of his briefcase and scrutinized the front of my house. "Who's that?" I asked, pointing to the third visitor. "That's Mr. Hartwell," Priscilla answered hastily. "The insurance agent. We thought you might want to renew your insurance at home." Insurance agent. I remembered my real insurance agent, the elderly Mr. Coleman, who had been servicing my policy for 15 years. Mr. Hartwell looked very different. Young, energetic, with shiny shoes and a fashionable haircut. In his hands was not an insurance folder, but a clipboard with some schematics. "Come on inside," I suggested, turning off the sprinkler hose. We made our way into the living room, where Hartwell immediately began looking around. His gaze lingered on ceilings, walls, windows. He was writing things down in a clipboard, occasionally pulling out a tape measure and measuring distances. Behavior strange for an insurance agent who should be primarily interested in the documents and terms of the policy. "Beautiful house," Hartwell remarked, taking a picture of the fireplace. "Built what year?" 1987, I replied. "Excellent condition for its age," he nodded, making notes. "And the area is what?" Leland hastily interjected. "Dad doesn't remember exactly. We didn't find the papers at home." Strange. The deeds to the house were in my safe, and Leland knew it. Why would he lie to a stranger? "That's okay. I'll measure it myself," Hartwell smiled. "Insurance needs accurate data." He continued to walk around the rooms, taking pictures and writing something down. Priscilla nervously adjusted her hair and kept glancing at her husband. Leland pretended to study my books, but I could see him watching Hartwell's work. "And how many bedrooms are in the house?" the agent asked. "3, I answered. "And all in good condition?" "Yes, of course." Hartwell looked into my bedroom, took pictures of the furnishings, checked the windows. Then he walked through to the room that had once been Leland's nursery and now served as my office. There was a desk, bookshelves, and Dora's old leather chair. "This room could easily be remodeled," he murmured, turning more to the clipboard than to me. "Remodeled into what?" I clarified. "I mean renovate," Hartwell corrected quickly, "if needed after an insurance claim." The explanation sounded lame. Insurance agents aren't in the business of scheduling repairs. They assess risks and calculate premiums. And this man was acting like an interior designer or architect. "Can I see the garage?" he asked. We walked out into the yard, where I opened the garage door. Hartwell scrutinized the room, measured the length and width with a tape measure, and photographed the workbench with tools. He was particularly interested in the dimensions. He measured the distance from wall to wall several times. "Spacious garage," he remarked. "You could put 2 cars in it." "Or a workshop," Priscilla added, and I saw Leland twitch at her words. "What kind of workshop?" Hartwell asked with interest. "Well, I mean theoretically," my sister-in-law mewed, "if one wanted to." The conversation was getting stranger and stranger. Why would an insurance agent know about the possibility of setting up a workshop in my garage? And why was Priscilla discussing the remodeling of my house with a stranger? We returned to the house, where Hartwell pulled out a calculator and began to calculate something. From time to time, he asked questions about utilities, heating, the condition of the roof. Normal questions for a real estate appraiser, but not for an insurance agent. "Where are the deeds to the house kept?" he inquired. "In my safe," I answered honestly. "May I see it?" Leland interjected again. "Dad gets tired of formalities. Perhaps some other time?" Hartwell nodded, but I noticed the disappointment in his eyes. He clearly wanted to see the documents right away. "I'll do a preliminary assessment for now then," he said, closing the clipboard, "and I'll call you back in a few days." "What kind of estimate?" I asked. "Don't you just need the cost of restoration for insurance?" "Sure, that's exactly what I'm doing," Hartwell replied hastily, "estimating the cost of rebuilding the house in case of damage." But his eyes said otherwise. He was not estimating the cost of rebuilding, but the market value of the property, and he was doing it very professionally, taking into account all the details and specifics. After the guests left, I stayed in the living room, trying to figure out what had happened. Leland and Priscilla hurriedly said goodbye and left, citing urgent business. Hartwell shook my hand and promised to send me the calculations in the mail. In the evening, I called the insurance company and spoke to Mr. Coleman. "Mr. Ridgway, no one was referred to you," my agent marveled, "and you don't need to renew your policy. You have excellent coverage, all up to date." "And who is Mr. Hartwell?" "I've never heard that name. We don't have such an employee in our company." So the stranger was not an insurance agent. But then who was he? And why had Leland brought him to my house under false pretenses? I spent the evening pondering over the possible explanations. Maybe my son wanted to surprise me. Was he planning to give me a gift of a renovation or an interior upgrade? But then why lie about the insurance? The next day, I decided to look up information about Mr. Hartwell on the internet. Dora had taught me how to use a computer shortly before my illness, and I was gradually mastering the tool. I typed Hartwell Real Estate Appraiser, Santa Monica, into the search engine. The results came up immediately. Daniel Hartwell, a licensed real estate appraiser with an office on 3rd Street. There were pictures on his company's website, and I recognized yesterday's guest. Specialty residential appraisals for sale, purchase, refinancing. No mention of insurance services. It all made sense now. Leland had brought a real estate appraiser to my house, not an insurance agent. My property was appraised for sale, not insurance. And my son lied to me to hide the real purpose of the visit. But why would he need an appraisal? I own the house. I'm alive and well. I have no intention of selling the property. The only explanation that came to mind was too unpleasant to be believed right away. Leland studied the value of the inheritance. I sat in Dora's chair and tried to find other reasons for the appraiser's visit. Maybe my son was planning to take out a loan against my house, or wanted to know the amount of inheritance taxes. But all of these options required my consent, and Leland was clearly acting in secret. 3 days later, I did indeed receive a letter from Hartwell, a thick envelope with his company logo on it. Inside was a detailed appraisal of my house, floor plans, photos, description of condition, market value, $850,000. That's what my house was worth in today's market. A good plot, quality construction, a prestigious neighborhood. All this formed an impressive sum, an amount that my son was very interested in. The report also had recommendations to increase the value. Kitchen remodeling, bathroom upgrades, replacing flooring. Standard realtor advice for preparing a home for sale. Recommendations Hartwell would never make for an insurance appraisal. I stashed the documents in the safe next to the will and bank papers. Now I had proof that Leland was planning my death in advance. Researching the value of the inheritance, consulting with specialists, preparing to receive the estate. On Saturday, my son arrived alone, without Priscilla. He said he wanted to see if I was okay, if I needed any help around the house. I offered him coffee and we sat on the veranda overlooking the garden. "How's it going with that insurance agent?" I asked, watching for a reaction. Leland hesitated for a moment. "Ah, Mr. Hartwell. Yes, everything's fine. He said your insurance is fine." Lie number 2, Hartwell couldn't say anything about insurance because he's not an insurance agent. "And why did he measure the rooms?" I continued. "To calculate the cost of rebuilding," my son quickly replied. "They need the exact dimensions." Lie number 3, insurance companies use standard rates per square meter. They don't need detailed measurements of every room. And pictures? For what? For documentation, standard procedure. Leland lied easily and naturally, as if he'd prepared the answers to my questions in advance. But I could see the tension in his posture, the nervous trembling of his fingers, the quick glances to the side. "Did he send the report?" "What report?" "Well, the insurance appraisal results." The son looked confused for a moment. "Not yet. He said he'd send it in a week." And the report had been in my safe for 3 days. So Leland didn't know that Hartwell had sent the documents to my address and not his. "Dad, have you thought about moving to a smaller house?" Leland asked suddenly. "This one's big for one person." That was it. The real purpose of the conversation. He wanted me to offer to sell the house myself. "No, I haven't," I replied calmly. "I'm comfortable here." "But it's expensive to maintain, isn't it? Taxes, repairs, utilities. It would be easier in an apartment." "I have enough money for maintenance." Sure, Leland agreed hastily. "I just thought you might be lonely in such a big house." "Lonely it is, especially when the only son comes only to appreciate the inheritance." "I'm used to it," I said. "Mom loved this house too." At the mention of Dora, Leland's face twitched. He always took talking about his mother hard, trying to change the subject or find an excuse to leave. "Yes, of course," he murmured. "But that was a long time ago." A long time ago. For me, my wife's death happened yesterday. I still waited for the sound of her footsteps in the morning, listened to the familiar voice in the next room. But for my son, it had been a long time ago, and the house had become a burden to be sold as soon as possible. We finished our coffee in silence. Leland tried several times to return to the subject of moving, but I gave him one-word answers. Finally, he gave up and got ready to leave. "Dad, if you need anything, call me right away," he said, kissing my cheek. "Sure," I replied. But we both knew I wouldn't be calling. We no longer had any common topics of conversation other than money and real estate. In the evening, I sat in the garden for a long time, watching the sunset. Dora loved this time of day, saying that the evening sun made all the colors softer and warmer. We often sat here together, planning tomorrow, sharing our impressions of our lives. Now I sat alone and realized that for my son, I was already dead. He was only waiting for official confirmation of this fact. 3 months ago, on a hot June day, I was trimming the hedges along the fence when I heard Priscilla's voice from the open kitchen window. She was on the phone with one of her friends and the tone of her voice was unusually frank. Apparently, she thought I had left to go to the store as planned, but had decided at the last minute to do the garden. "Yes, I realize that sounds awful," my sister-in-law was saying, and I heard the sound of the refrigerator opening. "But you know our situation?" I froze with the pruning shears in my hands. "What situation? What could sound terrible?" "Leland gets a good deal, but it's not enough for a normal life," Priscilla continued. "And I've got fewer clients. A crisis, you know." The sound of a door closing, the rustle of packages. She was apparently preparing a snack for herself. "Sure, the old man helps." There was a carelessness in her voice, as if she were discussing the weather. "But that's not the solution to the problem. You can't spend your whole life hanging on to your parents' necks." Old man. That's what she'd called me in a conversation with a friend. Not Daddy Chris, not father-in-law, not Christopher. Old man. "No, he's not bad. He's hanging in there," Priscilla laughed. "But at his age, you know, the doctors say his heart isn't very good." The doctors didn't say anything like that. I had a routine checkup last year, and the cardiogram showed normal results for my age. Dr. Raymond even complimented me on my fitness and advised me to continue my daily walks. "Listen, do you remember how your aunt had it?" Priscilla's voice became quieter, conspiratorial. "She was in pain for a long time too, and then she had a stroke." I felt my back grow cold. She was discussing my possible death like discussing the weekend rain forecast. "No, come on, I don't wish him harm," my sister-in-law added hastily. "It's just, well, nature is nature. At 75, stuff can happen. Anything can happen." A phrase people say when they want something to happen but don't dare say it outright. I cautiously took a few steps closer to the window, hiding behind a rose bush. Priscilla was sitting with her back to me, and I could see her gesturing with her free hand, holding her phone to her ear. "Yeah, the house is nice," she agreed with the unseen interlocutor. "And the neighborhood is upscale. The realtor said houses like this are selling fast right now." Realtor. So they'd already consulted with a realtor, studied the real estate market while I was alive and well. "Well, we'll get a better condo," Priscilla said dreamily, "overlooking the ocean, and we can use the rest of the money to start a business." The rest of the money, my money, which she was already distributing as she saw fit. "Yes, I know that sounds cynical," my sister-in-law sighed, "but it's not our fault it happened this way. We didn't ask him to die." Not asked, but they wouldn't have minded if it had happened sooner. "Look, how long do you think he'll last?" Priscilla asked, and there was impatience in her voice. "Because we're getting tired of waiting." Tired of waiting for me to die. I stood in my own garden and listened to my sister-in-law complain to her friend about me living too long. "Well, yes, old people do get sick for long periods of time sometimes," she agreed. "But he seems to be doing okay so far. Even drives his own car." Even drives his own car. She spoke of it with disappointment, as if my independence was a personal insult. "What does Leland say?" I held my breath, waiting for an answer. "Leland is more patient," Priscilla laughed. "Says we should wait for the natural course of events. But I can see how worried he is about money." The natural course of events. A nice euphemism to describe waiting for a parent to die. "Yes, of course we can't rush anything," the daughter-in-law added. "But sometimes you just wish things would get done. To have it all resolved already. That is, for me to die and leave them an inheritance." I heard footsteps in the hallway. Leland had come home from work earlier than usual. Priscilla hurriedly said goodbye to her friend and hung up the phone. "Hello, darling," she called out to her husband. "How are you?" "Tired," replied the son. "Where's Daddy?" "In the garden, I think. Digging something." Digging. Another disparaging word. I wasn't digging. I was tending the garden I'd been creating with Dora for over 20 years. Why don't we have dinner here? Priscilla suggested. I don't feel like cooking at home. Leland agreed, and I realized I needed to act natural. There was no way to show that I'd heard the phone conversation. I rustled the leaves loudly, trimming off the extra branches, and a few minutes later I walked into the house. Oh, Dad, hi, Leland smiled. We thought we'd have dinner here, if that's okay with you. Of course it's okay, I replied. The fridge is full. Priscilla was already pulling out groceries and planning the menu. She was a master of transformation. Within minutes of talking about my desired death, she had transformed into a caring daughter-in-law, preparing dinner for the family. How's work going? I asked my son, pouring myself some water. Fine. Sales are going. Customers are in. Leland shrugged. The manager's not happy with the plans again, though. Says we need to try harder. Do they give you a bonus? They do, but not much. It's enough to live on, but not for my dreams. Dreams. I wonder what kind of dreams the son had in mind. The ocean view condo Priscilla was talking about? Or the business they plan to start with my money? What are your dreams? I inquired. Leland hesitated for a second, as if he hadn't expected such a question. Well, the usual, he answered vaguely. A better house, a new car, maybe have kids. Kids in my bedroom, as discussed last week. Children to play among the sold furniture and discarded books. And you, Priscilla, what are your dreams? I turned to my sister-in-law. She was cutting vegetables for a salad and didn't look up. About stability, she replied succinctly. About not having to think about money every day. About the stability that would come with an inheritance. About not depending on my help, but getting everything at once and forever. Over dinner, we talked about the weather, politics, the news, the usual family topics that hit everyone's real thoughts. Leland told anecdotes from work. Priscilla complained about the difficult customers at the salon. I listened and thought about the phone conversation I'd heard a few hours ago. Daddy, do you remember when Mom used to make this salad? Leland suddenly asked, pointing to the plate. Of course he remembered. Dora used to add some walnuts and honey to the usual vegetable salad. It was unusual and delicious. She said she'd gotten the recipe from her grandmother. I remember, I nodded. She always wondered why everyone liked that simple salad so much. Yeah, Mom's hands were golden, my son agreed, and there was warmth in his voice. Priscilla wrinkled her nose. She didn't like it when we brought up Dora, perhaps because her late wife overshadowed her own virtues. Dora could cook, play the piano, tell interesting stories, and Priscilla could only dye hair and plan other people's funerals. Too bad she didn't write down the recipes, Leland added. A lot of the dishes went with her. Not all of them, I objected. Some I memorized. Really? What don't you cook for? No one to cook for. The phrase sounded sadder than I'd planned. Leland lowered his eyes. Priscilla focused on her food. An awkward silence reigned for a few moments. How about next time you cook? Her sister-in-law suggested. We'd like to try it. Beautiful words, but we all realized that next time might not happen. Our family dinners became less and less frequent, and our conversations more and more formal. After dinner, Leland helped me clean up the dishes, while Priscilla answered messages on her phone. Her friend was probably texting her a continuation of the day's conversation. Dad, you look good, my son said as he wiped the plates. Do you play sports? A walk every morning. The doctor advises it. That's the right thing to do. You have to keep in shape. Keep in shape at 75. For what? So you can torture your loved ones longer with your existence? And how's your overall health? Leland continued. Normal. Sometimes my blood pressure spikes, but that's common at our age. Do you take pills? When I need to. My son nodded, but I noticed how carefully he was listening to my answers, examining symptoms, gauging perspective, looking for signs of impending denouement. Do you go to the doctor regularly? Every 6 months, a routine checkup. What does he say? That I'm not doing too badly for my age. Disappointment flashed in Leland's eyes. He wanted to hear a different answer. That the doctor was concerned, that the tests were bad, that there wasn't much time left. That's good, he said, but his voice sounded unconvinced. Priscilla finished her correspondence and joined us. We'll probably go, she informed him. We have to get up early tomorrow. They packed quickly, as they always did lately. The visits used to drag on late into the evening, and we'd play cards, watch movies, and discuss the news. Now they'd come over for dinner and go straight home. "Thanks for dinner," Leland said, kissing me on the cheek. "Goodbye, Daddy Chris," Priscilla added with fake tenderness. I walked them to their car and waved goodbye. The black Lexus disappeared around the corner, leaving me alone with my evening thoughts. I couldn't sleep for a long time that night. Lying in bed, I thought about the phone conversation I had overheard. "Soon the problem will solve itself," was the phrase that wouldn't leave my mind. So I was a problem for them, a living problem that was interfering with their plans and eating away at their patience. Dora always said that people show their true colors in difficult moments. When things are good, anyone can be kind and caring. But true character shows itself when things don't go according to plan. For Leland and Priscilla, the difficult moment was my long life. They were waiting for an inheritance, and I was getting on with my life. They were planning a new apartment and business, and I was ruining the plans with my stubborn health. I got up this morning with a firm decision. It was time to make a change. Not to die, of course, but to change the terms of the game. If I'm just a problem for them that should resolve itself, then let it not resolve itself in the way they expect. I began to plan, thinking through options, exploring possibilities, preparing for change. The time of patiently waiting was over. Saturday morning, I was sitting on my porch with a cup of coffee and reading the newspaper when I heard the scraping of brakes in the driveway. The car stopped with a sudden sound as if the driver had pressed the pedal at the last moment. I looked up and saw Leland's black Lexus parked at an unnatural angle against the curb. His son and daughter-in-law jumped out of the car, and I could tell from their gait that they weren't coming for a friendly visit. Leland walked wide and briskly, waving his arms. Priscilla was lumbering along in high heels, but her face was red with anger or excitement. "Papa!" Leland shouted, not yet reaching the veranda. "What the hell's the matter with the map?" I folded the paper neatly and set the cup on the table. The moment had come sooner than I'd expected. It's only been 3 days since the card was blocked, and they're already here with a claim. "What's the problem with the card?" I asked calmly, pretending I didn't know what they were talking about. "Your card is blocked." Priscilla flew up the veranda steps, her voice shaking with indignation. "We went to buy furniture yesterday, and the card doesn't work." Furniture. So they had already spent money on furnishing the house they planned to inherit. Weird, I shrugged. What exactly was going on? Leland stepped closer, and I could see he was barely holding back. Face red, fist clenched, jaw tense. It was like nothing I'd seen since his teenage years, when he threw tantrums over pocket money. "What was going on?" he repeated threateningly. What was going on was that Priscilla almost had a heart attack at the ATM. "The card doesn't work. The ATM says contact the bank. The people in line are pissed off." "You're crazy," Priscilla intervened, pointing a finger at me. "My wife almost had a heart attack at the ATM, all because of your stupid experiments with bank cards." I looked at my sister-in-law more closely. There was no sign of a recent heart attack or even pre-infarction. Her makeup was perfect, her breathing even, her complexion healthy. The only thing that gave away his stress was her hands shaking and her shrill voice. "Yes, can you imagine the shame?" she piped up. "I'm standing at the ATM, and it tells me the account is blocked. People are watching, thinking I'm some kind of fraud." "And what did you buy?" I inquired. "Who cares what I bought?" Leland exploded. "It's not about the purchases. It's about the fact that you did something to the card and didn't warn me." "Bedroom furniture," Priscilla answered honestly, not noticing her husband's warning glance. "A beautiful crib and dresser. Discounted." Bedroom furniture. For my bedroom, which they planned to convert to a nursery. So they weren't just dreaming of change. They were already starting to put plans into action. "Why do you need bedroom furniture?" I clarified. "Is something broken at your house?" Priscilla looked confused for a moment, but Leland quickly intervened. "That's not important. What's important is that the card doesn't work, and you're keeping quiet as if nothing happened." He stepped even closer, looming over me. Leland had been tall and thin when he was young, but he had gained weight with age and now looked imposing. Apparently, he was counting on his physical superiority to get him the results he wanted. "Papa, what have you done with the map?" he demanded an answer. "Blocked it," I replied calmly. "Why?" "Decided to change my bank details." Leland and Priscilla looked at each other. They clearly hadn't expected such a simple explanation. And why would you want to change your bank details? The sister-in-law asked warily. To be safe, I shrugged. At my age, you have to be careful with your finances. What safety? My son didn't understand. Did you have your card stolen? No, it wasn't stolen. Just decided it was time to update my bank information. It was true, though not completely. I did need security, but not from thieves, but from my own family. But you do realize we're using that card, Priscilla exclaimed indignantly. We have all the payments set up, automatic debits. Automatic debits. So they didn't just ask for money every now and then, they set up regular payments from the account. Without my knowledge, they turned my card into a source of regular income. What automatic debits? I asked. Priscilla was confused again, and Leland shook his head angrily. Well, miscellaneous payments, he answered vaguely. Utilities, insurance. We had an agreement. We hadn't agreed on any automatic debits. I gave them money when they asked for it, but I never allowed them to use the account on their own. How much money was deducted? I inquired. That doesn't matter, Leland barked. What matters is that you blocked the card without warning. And why should I have been warned? It's my card and my account. The phrase sounded harsher than I'd planned, but the situation needed clarity. They were acting as if they had the right to handle my money. Of course it's yours, my son agreed, but there was a strained note in his voice. But we're family. Family warns you about these things. Family. An interesting concept from a man who's planning the sale of my house and discussing my death with my wife. Okay, count me as a warning, I said. The card is blocked. I'll get a new one in a few days. What happens to the limit? Priscilla asked quickly. What limit? Well, how much money can be withdrawn per month? The question gave away the true purpose of the visit. They weren't interested in an explanation, but in being able to keep spending my money. The new limit will be less, I answered honestly. How much less? Leland tensed. Significantly. My son and daughter-in-law glanced over again, and I saw anxiety in their gazes. Not concern for my well-being, but fear for their own financial plans. Dad, why reduce the limit? Leland asked cautiously. You have enough money, don't you? Enough for my needs. What about our needs? Priscilla burst out, and she immediately blushed, realizing that she had said too much. What are your needs? I interjected. Well, I mean, family needs. Leland tried to correct the situation. Sometimes emergencies arise, though. Such as what? Car repairs, medical treatment, unexpected expenses. Car repairs, medical treatment, unexpected expenses, and furniture for the bedroom they were planning on converting to a nursery, and the condo overlooking the ocean, and the business Priscilla dreamed of. Don't you have your own savings? I asked. Of course I do, my son answered hastily, but there isn't always enough. Then earn more. The phrase hung in the air. I had never said anything like that before, always helping without too many questions or complaints. But now the rules of the game had changed. Dad, you're acting strange about something, Priscilla remarked. Maybe you're not feeling well? It's a classic trope. When the arguments run out, they hint at mental problems. They say the old man is starting to lose adequacy, so he's making irrational decisions. I feel fine, I replied. Better than I have in a long time. But you realize we're used to a certain level of support, Leland continued cautiously. Abruptly changing things isn't the right thing to do. A level of support. They're used to me funding their lives, and now they're demanding guarantees for the future. What if I get sick and need money for treatment? I inquired. Well, you have insurance, Priscilla shrugged. What if the insurance isn't enough? Then we'll help, Leland promised generously. We'll help, with my own money, which they already thought was theirs. And if I decide to change my will, I added. The question sounded like a thunderclap. Priscilla turned pale and Leland took a step back. Why would you want to change the will? The son asked cautiously. It's not much. People change plans sometimes. But we're your family, reminded the daughter-in-law in a trembling voice. Of course we're family. I didn't bother to add that our concept of family was apparently different. To me, family is people who love each other. To them, family is people who are entitled to an inheritance. Dad, you're scaring us, Leland admitted. What's going on? Why are you talking so strangely? Nothing much is going on. Just decided to review financial matters. Don't we have a right to know about your decisions? Priscilla was indignant. What rights exactly? I clarified. She opened her mouth to answer, but then realized that any answer would look self-serving. Legally, they had no rights to my money as long as I was alive, and moral rights had to be earned through care and love, not through inheritance planning. We're just worried about you, Leland tried to soften the situation. Afraid you're making decisions under stress. What kind of stress? Well, loneliness, age, losing your mom, losing his mom. He brought up mom only to explain my inadequacy. Dora had died 10 years ago, but it was a convenient argument for my son in an argument about money. I'm coping with loneliness, I replied dryly. But maybe you should consult a doctor, Priscilla suggested. Or a psychologist? Psychologist. The next step is to try to have me declared incompetent. If they can't get the money with persuasion, they'll try the legal route. Thanks for your concern, but I'm fine. I declined the offer. Then please explain what's going on with the money, Leland demanded. We have a right to know. Have a right to know what? Well, how much money is left, how it's distributed, who gets it. There it was, an honest confession. They weren't interested in my health or well-being, but in the size and distribution of the inheritance. The money stays where it was, I replied. In the bank, in accounts, in investments. And who gets it? Priscilla couldn't stand it. We'll see, I said uncertainly. That phrase finally finished them off. They realized that I was seriously considering changing my will, and that was changing all their plans. Dad, can we talk frankly? Leland asked. We're already talking frankly. No, I mean really frank, without any reticence. Of course. My son took a deep breath and looked me in the eye. We were counting on an inheritance, he said bluntly. Plan for the future on the premise that we get the house and the money. And suddenly it turns out you can change everything. Finally, honesty. Not love, not caring, but calculating on the inheritance. What if I live another 20 years? I asked. That can't happen, Priscilla replied quickly. Then she caught herself. I mean, we'd be only too happy, but your plans will fall apart. Well, yes, Leland admitted. Frankly, yes. We looked at each other in silence. On the veranda of my home of 40 years, my son explained to me that my long life was ruining his plans, and he considered it a normal cause for complaint. I see, I said at last. Then I have news for you. I rose from my chair and walked to the veranda railing, turning my back to my son and daughter-in-law. The roses that Dora and I had planted 20 years ago were blooming in the garden. White, pink, red. She'd chosen the varieties by color, said the garden should be like a rainbow. Now those roses were among the few witnesses to our former life, which Leland planned to erase along with the house. What new? Priscilla asked impatiently. I turned around and looked at them. The son stood tensely, fists clenched, ready for any trouble. The daughter-in-law was nervously fiddling with the strap of her purse, her face a mixture of fear and hope. They waited for an explanation, expecting a compromise or concessions. I've changed the will, I informed them calmly. Leland blinked several times, as if he didn't understand the meaning of what I said. Changed it how? He interjected. Rewrote it completely. New beneficiary, new terms. Priscilla turned pale and grasped the veranda rail. What do you mean, new beneficiary? In a trembling voice, she asked. It means that the money won't go to you. The phrase sounded harsh, but I wasn't about to soften the blow. They had brought the situation to this point themselves with their own plans and calculations. To whom? Leland squeezed out. To the homeless animal shelter. There was a silence that lasted a few seconds. Priscilla opened her mouth but made no sound. Leland stood motionless, staring at me with an unseeing gaze. Animals? My sister-in-law finally interjected. Yes, to the stray animal shelter on Wilshire Boulevard. They do a good job helping cats and dogs find homes. You're kidding, the son whispered. I'm not kidding. It's completely official. The notary notarized the paperwork the day before yesterday. I had indeed been to the notary the day before yesterday, though I hadn't signed the new will yet. But they didn't know the details, and my confidence convinced them of the seriousness of the situation. Priscilla began to sway in her seat. Her face became waxy. Her breathing quickened. It's impossible, she muttered. You can't give all the money to the animals. I can, and I did. But we're family, the daughter-in-law shouted. We have rights. What rights? Legal ones? You have no rights to my property while I'm alive. Leland sank slowly into his chair, as if his legs had ceased to hold him up. He stared into the void, trying to comprehend what he had heard. All the money? He asked quietly. Everything. Bank accounts, investments, life insurance. The house, too. You're giving the house to the animals, too? It's going to be sold and the money's going to the shelter. Priscilla suddenly grabbed her head and groaned. I thought she was faking it, but then I saw her sway and settle to the veranda floor. Priscilla! Leland rushed to her. His sister-in-law lay on the wooden boards of the veranda with her eyes closed. Her face was pale, her breathing shallow. A real faint, not a simulation. Get some water, the son asked, supporting his wife by the shoulders. I went into the house and got a glass of cold water. When I returned, Priscilla was already regaining consciousness, blinking and trying to sit up. What happened? She asked confusedly. You fainted, Leland explained, helping her up. The daughter-in-law sipped some water, stood for a few minutes, leaning on her husband. Then she looked at me, and there was understanding in her eyes. She remembered what we had talked about before she fainted. Is it true? She whispered. About the will? It's true. You gave all the money to the animals? Yes. Priscilla began to sway again, but Leland held her hand firmly. Sit down, he commanded his wife, settling her in a chair. My son turned back to me, and I saw something new in his eyes. Not just surprise or disappointment, but cold fury. Is this about the conversation yesterday? He asked. What conversation? When we talked about plans. Did you take offense? Offended. He thought I'd made a drastic decision because of a childish grudge. Not offended, just realized some things. What things? That I'm already dead to you. You're planning my funeral, appraising my inheritance, dreaming of a new life with my money. And I'm still alive. Leland opened his mouth to object, but then changed his mind. He realized that denials would look lame. Dad, we didn't mean to, he began. Didn't want what? My death? Or just didn't want me to know about it? The son was silent. Priscilla sobbed quietly in the chair, pressing a handkerchief to her eyes. How much money? She asked suddenly. How much what? I did not understand. How much money did you give to the animals? A direct question demanded a direct answer. Everything I have, about $2 million. At the words $2 million, Priscilla turned pale again and gripped the armrests of her chair. Leland stiffened as if he had received an electric shock. $2 million, he repeated quietly. You gave $2 million to stray cats. And to dogs, the shelter is mixed. The sarcasm was misplaced, but I couldn't help myself. Their reaction to the size of the amount showed their true priorities. That can't be right, my sister-in-law muttered. People don't do that. They do if they have reasons. What reasons could there be for such madness? Leland exploded. Do you consider charity madness? I think it's crazy to give all your money to animals when you have a family. Family. He was still trying to play on family feelings, not realizing that that card was already beaten. What has my family been doing for me lately? I asked. Leland thought for a moment, trying to recall examples of care or attention. But other than asking for money, nothing came to mind. We love you, he said uncertainly. How exactly does that love manifest itself? We visit, we chat, we inquire about your affairs. You come for the money. You chat about plans to remodel my house, inquiring about my affairs to see how long I have to live. Every word was true and we all understood it. Leland tried to object, but there was no argument to be found. What do animals do for you? Priscilla asked wryly. They ask for nothing, I answered. That's their chief virtue. She sobbed and pressed the handkerchief to her eyes again. The tears were genuine, but not from the grief of losing her father, but from the grief of losing money. Can you change your mind? Leland asked. I can. Change it? No. The one-word answer sounded like a sentence. The son realized that entreaties were useless, and his face grew rigid. We will contest the will, he declared. On what grounds? Incapacity. No one in their right mind would give $2 million to an animal. The threat was expected. If they couldn't get the money amicably, they would try to take it away through the courts. I have a doctor's note saying I'm fully competent, I reported. Got it last week before I went to the notary. It was true. Anticipating possible problems, I'd had a medical examination beforehand and obtained a mental capacity document. The certificate can be forged, Priscilla said angrily. It can, but mine is real. Are there any witnesses, Leland continued, who can testify that you were of sound mind when you signed the will? A notary, 2 independent witnesses, the doctor who issued the certificate. Is that enough? Their plan to contest the will was crumbling before my eyes. I'd prepared for this situation far better than they'd expected. This is wrong, Priscilla whispered. You're obligated to leave an inheritance to your family. Obliged in whose opinion? Humanly. And humanly, what's it like to wait until your father dies to get his money? The question hung in the air. Neither Leland nor Priscilla found anything to answer. Suddenly the son staggered and grasped the railing of the veranda. His face turned gray, his breathing quickened. Leland, his wife called out to him, but he did not answer. His eyes rolled back, his legs went under, and his son collapsed on the wooden floor of the veranda next to where Priscilla had been lying a few minutes before. Leland! Screamed the daughter-in-law, rushing to her husband. A second fainting spell in 10 minutes. The news of the will had been harder on them than I had expected. Leland lay motionless, eyes closed, pale and lifeless. I went to fetch water again, leaving Priscilla to shake her husband by the shoulders and call his name. When I returned, my son was already regaining consciousness, blinking and trying to sit up. What happened? He asked weakly. You fainted, the wife explained. So did I. Leland drank some water, regained consciousness a little, and looked at me with an expression of utter confusion. Is it true, as he asked, or did I dream it? It is true, I confirmed. Did you really give all the money to the animals? Yes. And the house too? The house too. My son covered his face with his hands and moaned softly. Priscilla put her arm around his shoulders and they sat on the veranda floor like 2 shipwrecked men. What will happen now? The sister-in-law whispered. You'll live on your paychecks, I answered, like most people. And the loans, and the plans. We counted on other people's money. It was a mistake. They rose slowly from the floor and sat down in their chairs, supporting each other. Both looked shattered, as if they had just learned of their own deaths. Maybe you'll change your mind some more? Priscilla asked hopefully. I won't change my mind. What if we change? Treat you better? It's too late. Why too late? Leland didn't understand. Because now I know who you really are. That phrase finally broke their resistance. They realized that something irreversible had happened, that our relationship had changed forever. We sat in silence, listening to the sounds of the garden. The wind rustled in the leaves, birds sang, a dog barked somewhere in the distance. The usual sounds of an ordinary day, against the background of which a family was crumbling, and destinies were being reshaped. After half an hour, Leland and Priscilla recovered a little, but their faces still expressed confusion and despair. They sat side by side in chairs on the veranda, holding hands and occasionally glancing at each other as if trying to figure out what to do next. I watched them, sipping my cooled coffee and thinking about how quickly people can change when their interests are affected. Dad, Leland finally spoke, and there was a new note in his voice. Not pleading, not desperation, but something colder and more calculated. I think we've all jumped to conclusions. Maybe we should think it over again. Consider what exactly? I inquired. Well, big decisions like this aren't made in a day. A will is a very important document. Maybe you were acting under the influence of emotion? And so it began. They were moving on to the second part of their plan, trying to prove that my decision was ill-considered or made under the influence. There was no emotion involved, I replied calmly. All decisions were made thoughtfully over a period of weeks. A few weeks, Priscilla marveled. You've been thinking about it that long? Thought about it from the moment I heard your phone conversation 3 months ago. Her sister-in-law blushed and lowered her eyes. She realized what conversation she was referring to. What conversation? Leland didn't understand. Your wife was discussing with a friend when I would die and how much money you would get. Priscilla flinched but didn't deny it. It was pointless to lie when all the cards were already revealed. That's not what I meant, she excused herself weakly. What did you mean when you said tired of waiting? That was stupid. I was just got upset about the money. Upset that I've been living too long? The direct question stumped her. Any answer would have looked terrible. Dad, we all say stupid things sometimes, Leland interjected. But to draw such conclusions from one bad conversation? Not from one. From the home appraisal you ordered under the guise of insurance. From your plans to remodel my rooms. From discussing the sale of my belongings. My son realized I knew far more than they'd realized. Their secret plans and ulterior motives were known to me in detail. Okay, let's say we were wrong, he agreed. But that's no reason to disinherit us. What do you think is a reason? Well, if we didn't love you, treated you badly, didn't help you, did you help? Leland thought for a moment, trying to remember examples of his help. But other than occasional visits and requests for money, nothing came to mind. We've come to see you, talk to you, he began uncertainly, came for money, and chatted about how to spend my inheritance. That's not true. Then tell me, when was the last time you took an interest in my health? Not to see how long I had left, but just out of concern? The son was silent. Such an occasion he could not recall. And when was the last time you called me just to talk? Silence again. And when was the last time we spent time together without talking about money? Leland lowered his head. The answers to all these questions were obvious. But we're not enemies, Priscilla tried to interject. It's just that we have our own worries, jobs, plans for the future. Plans for my future, I corrected, for our future together. What common? I'm already dead in your plans. Priscilla cried again, but now the tears seemed less genuine, more like an attempt to elicit pity and change my mind. Dad, you do realize that people sometimes fantasize. Leland tried a different approach. It doesn't mean we really wanted you dead. What does it mean? That we were thinking about the future, made plans. That's normal for any family. It's normal to plan for the death of a parent? Not death, but, well, the natural course of events. The natural course of events. The same phrase Priscilla had used in the phone conversation. And what does that natural course of events include? Well, when people get old, they pass away, and the family gets an inheritance. That makes sense. Logical. Have you tried speeding up that natural progression? What? Leland didn't understand. Have you thought about helping nature, nudge things along? The question sounded ominous, and both turned pale. What? Do you think we wanted to kill you? The son was horrified. Didn't we mean to? Of course not. We're not murderers. Just very impatient heirs. Yes, perhaps we were impatient, admitted Leland, but it's not a crime. A moral crime. He couldn't argue against that definition. Wanting a parent dead for money was indeed a moral offense. Okay, we were wrong, the son said. We apologize, we'll change. But you can't punish us so harshly. How exactly am I punishing you? You disinherit us. You're giving our money to animals. Your money? Leland realized he had said something unnecessary. I mean the money we should have gotten. By what right should we have? By birthright. I'm your son. And what does that give you? The right to inherit. And duties? What duties does the right to be my son give you? The son thought for a moment. Duties he hadn't thought about for some reason. Well, to help, to care, to love, he listed uncertainly. Have you done that? I tried. Tried how? Well, coming over, wondering, inquiring about the size of the inheritance. We were going in circles. Leland's every argument was shattered by facts that couldn't be denied. Daddy, what if we gave you back all the money we took? Priscilla suggested. All of it? Well, as much as we can. We'll pay it back gradually. And how much have you taken in the last year? Daughter-in-law and son looked at each other, trying to calculate the amount. 30,000 maybe, Leland answered uncertainly. 1,050, Priscilla corrected. Maybe more. And in 5 years? I don't know, a lot. A lot, I agreed. And you're going to pay that money back out of your paychecks? We'll try, my sister-in-law promised. How many years will it take you? They looked at each other again, coming up with numbers. About 10 years probably, Leland admitted. Will I live that long? Of course you will. You said yesterday that at my age, anything can happen. That was silly. You look great. Now they were praising my health, though not so long ago they were hinting at my imminent death. You know what strikes me most? I said. What? You still don't realize what your biggest mistake is. What's what? You treat me like an obstacle. I'm interfering with your plans, so you need to get rid of me or wait for nature to do it herself. Leland and Priscilla were silent, finding no objection. And you have become an obstacle to me too, I continued. You prevent me from living in peace by constantly reminding me that you are waiting for me to die. We will do no more, hastily promised my sister-in-law. It is too late. The trust is lost. And if we prove we've changed? How do you prove it? Priscilla hesitated, trying to think of convincing evidence. By coming over more often, helping out around the house, not asking for money? No asking for money for how long? Well, a year or 2 years. And then you'll start asking again? No. And if you have money problems, we'll work it out ourselves. And if you can't work it out? Priscilla hesitated. She realized that sooner or later she would come asking for help again. See? I said. You can't promise even now that you'll never count on my money again. But that's all right. Kids ask their parents for help sometimes. Sometimes they do. But you demand it all the time. We're not demanding. What do you call your behavior when you came here screaming over a blocked card? The sister-in-law blushed. Their visit had indeed felt more like a demand than a request. We were upset, Leland excused himself. Upset that you can't spend my money. We're used to your help. Used to living off me. This is a family. Families help each other. What did you do for me? Again that question to which they had no answer. We loved you, Priscilla said weakly. Show me that love. Show it how? Think of at least one occasion in the last year when you have done something for me simply out of love, with no expectation of reciprocation. There was a long silence. They went over their actions in their minds but found nothing suitable. We gave you birthday presents, Leland remembered. With my own money. I paid for the gifts you gave me myself. It was true. Priscilla always bought me gifts with my bank card and then ceremoniously handed them to me. We used to take you out to dinners, my sister-in-law tried, once in a year, and then I bought my own groceries. We called you when we needed money. Every argument they made failed. They couldn't give a single example of selfless caring. Okay, Leland said suddenly, and there was a hard note in his voice. What if we take a different path? Which is? We go to court, prove that the will is invalid. Now that was the threat I'd expected. On what grounds? Incapacity. No one in their right mind would give $2 million to an animal instead of their own family. I have a certificate of capacity. Certificates can be forged, or you can get one by withholding important information from a doctor. What kind of information? Well, depression, senile dementia, the effects of medication. Leland listed possible diagnoses that would help contest the will. I don't have depression or dementia, and I'm not on medication. That would have to be proven. I'm willing to undergo any and all tests. What if we find witnesses to prove you're insane? What witnesses? Neighbors, acquaintances, doctors. We'll tell them about your strange decisions. The threat was getting more specific. They were planning to deceive me to get the inheritance. And what will you tell them? That you're acting strangely, making irrational decisions, possibly under someone else's influence. Under whose influence? Scammers from the animal shelter. They could have tricked you into believing that animals are more important than family. It wasn't the smartest plan, but desperation drove them to any measure. What if the court doesn't believe your witnesses? They will. Everyone knows old people can be suggestible. I'm not an old man, and I'm not suggestible. That still has to be proven. Leland's tone was turning openly hostile. His son was turning into an enemy, willing to use any means necessary to achieve his goal. So you're willing to declare me crazy for money? I asked. Ready, if it's the only way to restore justice. Justice? Yes. Justice is when the inheritance goes to the family, not to stray dogs. The mask had finally fallen off. No love, no family feelings. Just greed and a willingness to go to extremes for money. Monday morning, I sat in the reception area of a Santa Monica Boulevard law office waiting to see Mr. Harris. The elderly lawyer had been serving my family for 15 years, helping with probate after Dora's death, handling insurance and tax cases. A calm, professional man who never asked unnecessary questions and always found the right legal solutions. The receptionist ushered me into the office, where Mr. Harris rose from behind a massive oak desk and shook my hand. Gray hair, attentive eyes behind thin-rimmed glasses, expensive suit, the classic image of a successful lawyer. "Mr. Ridgway, good to see you," he said, pointing to the chair across the desk. "Your call intrigued me. Were you talking about some changes to the will?" I settled into the leather chair and pulled out of my briefcase the documents I'd been preparing all week. "Yes, I want to completely rewrite the will, change the beneficiary and the terms of inheritance." Mr. Harris took out his glasses and put them on, preparing for a serious conversation. "I see. And what exactly do you want to change?" "Everything. Instead of a son, I want to make a charitable organization the heir." The lawyer's eyebrows crept upward, but he showed no surprise. He'd seen all sorts of family situations in his many years of practice. "What kind of organization?" "The Second Life Homeless Animal Shelter on Wilshire Boulevard." Harris jotted the name down in his notebook. "And how much is expected to be bequeathed?" "My entire estate. Bank accounts, investments, life insurance, real estate." "All of it," the lawyer clarified. "And nothing is left to your son?" "Nothing." Mr. Harris set aside his pen and took off his glasses. "Mr. Ridgway, this is a very serious decision. You realize that complete disinheritance could lead to litigation?" "I understand. That's why I'm here." "And the reason for this decision, if it's no secret?" I told him about the events of the last few months, an overheard phone conversation, a visit from a fake insurance agent, my family's plans for my house and property. Harris listened attentively, occasionally making notes. "I see," he said when I finished. "Does your son know about your decision?" "Yes, I informed him on Saturday." "How did he react?" "Fainted, and then promised to contest the will through the courts." The lawyer nodded understandingly. "A classic situation. Heirs often threaten to sue when they don't get what they expect, but it's far from always getting to the point. And if they do, then you have to be prepared. Please tell me about your health. Are there any problems that could be used to prove incapacity?" "No major problems of any kind. Mild hypertension, but it's controlled by diet. Last physical went fine." "Are you taking any medications that affect consciousness?" "No. Sometimes aspirin for headaches." "Alcohol?" "A glass of wine at dinner. Rarely." Harris wrote down the answers, building up a picture of my condition. "Have there been any recent episodes of forgetfulness, disorientation, inappropriate behavior?" "No. Memory's excellent, oriented, active." "Drive a car?" "Yes. License valid. No violations." "Excellent. That'll help in case of a trial." The lawyer opened a folder of sample documents. "Now for the procedure. For a will to be reliable, several conditions must be met. The first is a medical examination for capacity. I've already passed. Here's the certificate." I handed him the document from the clinic that confirmed my full mental capacity. "Great. The second thing is witnesses to the signing. We need 2 independent people who are not related to the testator by blood or money." "Can you arrange that?" "Of course. We've got people we've vetted." "The third thing is to videotape the signing procedure." "Why videotape?" "To show in court that you were of sound mind and good judgment, that no one forced you to sign." Mr. Harris pulled out a blank sheet of paper and began sketching out a plan. "I also recommend that you attach a written explanation of your motives to your will. Tell us why you made this decision, what led you to it." "Is that necessary?" "No, but it's very desirable. It will help the court understand the logic behind your actions." I nodded, agreeing to all the measures suggested. "And how long will it take to prepare the documents?" 3 days. We need to formulate the text correctly, take into account all the nuances of the law." "And when can we sign?" "Thursday or Friday." "What's convenient for you?" "Let's do Thursday." Harris wrote the date on his calendar. "One more question, Mr. Ridgway. Are you personally familiar with the management of the orphanage?" "No, but have been researching their operations online. Good reviews, transparent reporting, real help for the animals." I recommend you meet with them before you sign the will. Get to know them personally. Make sure they are a serious organization. Good idea. Can you arrange a meeting? I'd love to. I know the director of the shelter. She's a decent woman. We went over the details and I was about to leave, but the lawyer stopped me with a question. Mr. Ridgway, do you have any doubts about your decision? Disinheriting your only son is a pretty drastic step. I pondered my answer. There were doubts, of course. Leland was still my son, no matter what he did. But remembering our last conversation, his threats and his willingness to declare me incapacitated for money, the doubts faded. You know, Mr. Harris, all my life I thought I knew my son well. Thought he was a decent man who was just in a difficult financial situation. Helped him, supported him, counted on him to appreciate the care. The lawyer nodded understandingly. But it turns out I was wrong. My son sees me not as a father, but as an obstacle to money. He's waiting for me to die and planning how he'll spend the inheritance. And when I changed my will, he promised to declare me crazy. A difficult situation, Harris remarked sympathetically. Yes, but it made me realize an important thing. People show their true colors, not in good times, but in moments of crisis. When things don't go according to their plan. I got up from my chair and buttoned my jacket. And my son has shown that money is more important to him than family, that he's willing to do any mean thing to get his inheritance. Such a man does not deserve my money. What if he comes to his senses, apologize? It's too late. Trust is lost forever. Mr. Harris walked me to the office door. Then I'll see you Thursday. I'll get all the paperwork ready. Goodbye. Walking out of the office, I was relieved. The legal side of the matter would be handled professionally. The will would be drafted in such a way that it would be almost impossible to contest it, which meant Leland wouldn't get a dime of my money. On the way home, I stopped by the animal shelter to meet the future beneficiaries. A small building on the outskirts of town, clean enclosures, well-maintained grounds. The director, an energetic woman in her 50s, showed me all the rooms, told me about the work of volunteers, development plans. We try not just to keep animals, but to find them new families, she explained, showing me the playground for the dogs. We have great adoption statistics. Dozens of cats and dogs of various breeds and ages sat in enclosures. Some played, others slept. Still others looked hopefully at the visitors. None of them demanded money, made plans for my death, or discussed my will with friends. And what is the most money spent on? I inquired. Veterinary care, the director replied. Many animals come to us sick or injured. We have to treat them, perform surgeries. Do you get enough donations? We barely make ends meet. We're always looking for sponsors. I haven't told her about the will. It would be a surprise they'd find out after I died, but it was already clear that the money would go to a good cause. In the evening at home, I wrote a written explanation of the reasons for changing the will. I described in detail the behavior of my son and daughter-in-law, their plans, statements, attitude to me. The document turned out to be several pages long, a complete chronicle of the betrayal of close people. Rereading what I had written, I thought about how quickly life can change. 6 months ago, I had a family, even if it was not perfect, but a family. My son came regularly. My daughter-in-law called me Daddy. We had dinner together and discussed plans. I felt needed, useful, loved. I now realize that all of this was an illusion. Leland and Priscilla played the role of caring relatives, counting on the reward of inheritance. But my real feelings were revealed when I disrupted their plans. Tomorrow is the signing of the new will, and my married life is officially over. I'll be alone, but I'll be honest. No pretense, no false expectations, no people waiting for me to die. The will was signed Thursday morning as planned. Mr. Harris prepared the documents flawlessly. Every line was legally verified. Every condition was spelled out clearly and unambiguously. 2 witnesses, an elderly notary and a young clerk from a neighboring office, signed in the right places, confirming that I was of sound mind and signed the will voluntarily. A video camera recorded the whole procedure. The recording shows me calmly reading every page, asking questions to the lawyer, signing my signature in big letters. No signs of coercion, confusion, or inadequacy. If Leland tried to contest the will, this entry would be the primary evidence in my favor. Now, a week later, I sat on the veranda in the evening twilight and enjoyed the silence. The house seemed larger than usual, but not frighteningly empty, but spacious and uncluttered. No one was planning to sell it. No one was discussing remodeling the rooms. No one was waiting for me to die to realize their dreams. Leland called 3 times that week. The first time was on Monday, right after my visit to the lawyer. His voice shook with anger and despair. "Dad, I found out you were at Harris's," he said without greeting. "Did you really rewrite the will?" "Yes," I answered briefly. "Do you realize what you're doing?" "Quite. We're not going to leave it like this. We're going to sue." "You're right." The second call came on Wednesday. This time the tone was different. Pleading, almost begging. "Dad, let's have a human conversation. Maybe we misunderstood something?" "Misunderstood what exactly?" "Well, your motives. Why you decided to do this. Maybe we can fix it." "There's no need to fix anything. Everything is right." "But I'm your son." "Unfortunately." The phrase sounded harsher than I wanted it to, but Leland deserved the harshness. The third call was yesterday, Friday night. Again anger, again threats. "We found a lawyer," my son declared. "He says we have a good chance of contesting the will." "Good luck. We'll prove you weren't yourself when you signed the papers." "Try. We have witnesses." "What witnesses?" "The neighbors saw you acting strange, talking to yourself, forgetting to turn on the lights in the house." Ridiculous accusations. Talking to yourself at 75 is the norm, not a sign of insanity, and anyone can forget to turn on the lights. "Is that it?" I inquired. "It's enough. We'll see." There have been no calls since. Apparently Leland and his lawyer realized the case was hopeless. Too much evidence of my capacity, too little basis for challenge. Now I was truly free. No one had rights to my property. No one was making plans at my expense. No one was waiting for the gifts of fate in the form of an inheritance. The evening coolness pleasantly cooled my face after the hot day. Crickets sang in the garden. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. Rare cars drove by. The usual sounds of an ordinary evening in Santa Monica. I poured myself a glass of red wine and opened a book. A biography of Churchill that I'd been putting off for months. Now I had time for reading, for reflection, for a quiet life without family dramas. A ginger cat appeared on the veranda steps, skinny with tattered fur, obviously a stray. She cautiously came closer, sniffing and looking around. "Hi," I said to her. The cat was wary but didn't run away. Apparently hunger was stronger than fear. I went into the house and got a saucer of milk. I put it on the steps and walked a few steps away. The cat crept up to the saucer and began to lap, keeping a wary eye on me. "It's been a while since you ate?" I asked. She didn't answer, but from the way she drank the milk greedily, I could tell she was starving. When the saucer was empty, the cat sat up and began to wash herself, glancing at me from time to time. "Do you want more?" I brought a piece of chicken from the refrigerator. The cat ate it in seconds and looked at me expectantly. "That's it for today," I said. "Come back for more tomorrow." The cat purred, the first sound she'd made in a while. Then she came closer and rubbed herself against my leg. "Understand the gratitude?" I smiled. "A rare quality these days." She purred once more and settled down next to my chair. We sat in silence. An old man and a stray cat, two lonely creatures who had found each other. It's interesting that animals can't pretend. The cat was grateful for the food and showed it honestly, with no expectation of future handouts. She didn't plan my death, didn't estimate the size of my inheritance, didn't discuss with her friends when I would finally die. Maybe that's why I bequeath the money to animals. They don't know how to betray. The sun had set over the horizon, and the first stars appeared in the sky. Neighborhood lights came on in the house, and the sounds of dinners and family conversations could be heard. The ordinary life of ordinary people who loved each other, or at least tried to. Dora loved evenings on the veranda. We often sat there after dinner, discussing the day gone by, making plans for tomorrow. She would talk about books she was reading, movies she wanted to see, simple conversations of simple people who treasured every day together. Now those conversations were gone, but neither were Priscilla's fake smiles or Leland's self-serving calculations. Loneliness was more honest than pretended marital happiness. The cat curled up at my feet and dozed off. Trust is another rare quality. She trusted me, even though she'd only known me for a few hours. And my son, whom I had known for 47 years, was capable of betrayal. Tomorrow I'll buy cat food and set up a comfortable place to sleep on the veranda. If she wants to stay, let her stay. The company of an honest animal is better than the company of lying humans. The phone rang in the house, but I didn't go to answer it. It was probably Leland calling with more threats or requests, but I didn't want to hear his voice again. The cat woke up to the call, stretched, and went back to sleep. She didn't demand attention, didn't ask for explanations, didn't throw tantrums over phone calls. The perfect companion for an elderly person. I closed the book and poured more wine. There was a long life ahead with no family commitments, no financial requests, no inheritance plans. A life for myself as it should be at my age. The wind rustled the leaves of the roses we'd planted with Dora. Soon they will need to be pruned for winter, prepared for a new season of blooming. I will do it myself, as I have done for the last 10 years. No one else's help, no extra witnesses. The cat purred in her sleep, apparently dreaming of something good. For the first time in a long time, she slept safely, with a full belly and a warm place to rest. And I felt truly free for the first time in a long time.